Hello out there in theater land. My name is Peter Marks. I am the theater critic for the Washington Post, and I'm most pleased to be moderating a panel of extremely distinguished creative minds today under the auspices of the Kennedy Center. We're going to be speaking of a musical that has won more Tony Awards than almost any other in the history of Broadway, maybe only eclipsed by The Producers and Hamilton. That's The Band's Visit, and it won 10 Tony Awards and has been touring the country almost continuously. Obviously, the pandemic put a dent in that continuum, but they're back on the road, in fact, ending their touring life soon. But stopping first at the Kennedy Center, where The Band's Visit has played successfully before. And today, we're going to talk about the history of the show, its impact on the lives of these creative forces and on Broadway in America. So let me introduce our distinguished panel right now. First of all, I wanted to introduce David Yazbek, who is the composer lyricist hiding behind a book. David is, I have to say, a winner. Many people don't know this, but he has an EDOT. He doesn't have an EGOT, but he has an EDOT. He's got the Emmy, the Drama Desk, the Outer Critics Circle Award, and the Tony Award.
I got a Grammy too, Peter. Just so
darn it!
EGOT.
He's got an EGOT. You know,
and an Obie.
I knew I missed something in that joke. Anyway, David is the composer, lyricist of The Band's Visit, which if you've listened to this music, it is a gorgeous piece of a composition, singularly magical and beautiful. And he's also the composer of other Broadway shows, The Full Monty, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Tootsie. We've been on the verge of a nervous breakdown. And I'm sure many people listening in have seen or heard those shows as well. Welcome, David.
Hi.
In addition, we have Itamar Moses, the book writer or librettist, as some people think of it, of the Band's Visit. Itamar is a distinguished, I should keep using that word, he is an eminent playwright. You may know some of his plays, among them Nobody Loves You, Bach at Leipzig, The Four of Us. He's also a accomplished book writer of musicals, also the author of Fortress of Solitude, a musical that had a run at the Public Theater several years ago. Welcome, Itamar. It's lovely to see you. Next, we have the producer of The Band's Visit, Orin Wolf. Orin was one of the original motivators for this project and has an extensive record as a producer, both in New York and on the road, maybe the premier producer of tours in America through his organization Networks presentations. And Orin produced both the tour of The Band's Visit. He's also the producer at the moment of the continuation of the run of To Kill a Mockingbird. So welcome, Orin.
Thanks for having me.
And finally, last of course, but not least, we have David Cromer, the Tony-winning director. This is a panel of Tony winners complete here. So you're getting quite a treat here, YouTube viewers. David is the director of The Band's Visit. He also has directed extensively in New York and Chicago and elsewhere some fabulous theater. Maybe the seminal production of Our Town in the 21st Century, both in Chicago and New York, I believe. Also plays like Nina Raines's Tribes, which had a long run off Broadway and elsewhere. And very recently, The Sound Inside by Adam Rapp, which won a Tony for Mary Louise Parker, among other things. He is also, he doesn't like to keep a secret of this, that he's a MacArthur Fellow, that he will tell you very quickly when you meet him. I'm kidding. Yeah.
I hand it out. I just keep it on a card and I just hand it to you. That's the most. It's the classy way to do it.
I'm pulling David's leg. I have known him for years and greatly admire his work. So let's talk. Can we talk about this show? Which I have to say, audience, I have a deep love of, and I was listening to it again today, the score. There's a uniqueness to the sound of the show, to the feelings it evokes, to the way it presents itself to an audience and lets you become immersed in this very unusual story based on a 2007 movie of the same title. But maybe, Itamar, do you want to tell us a little bit, maybe just give audiences that may not know the story, do you want to just give us just a quick sense of what world we're entering in the band's visit?
Yeah. So 30 years ago, Maverick was an up-and-coming fighter pilot. The band's visit musical is based on an Israeli film of the same name from around 2006, 2007. And the story is very simple. It's about an Egyptian police band that goes to Israel to give a concert, and they're supposed to go to Petah Tikva, which is one of the larger towns in Israel. And there's a miscommunication at the bus station, and they wind up in the fictional for the movie, similarly named town of Beit HaTikva. And there's no buses for the rest of the night, and they're stranded there. So these Egyptian musicians have to spend a night in this middle of the desert backwater Israeli town, and they get taken in by the locals. And the story is just about all the little encounters and events and connections that form over the course of that one night between these musicians and these Israeli townspeople.
Orin, the question arises, and what the hell made you think that this could be a popular musical? As Itamar says, there isn't a lot that happens. In fact, that's the point, or one of the points, that a lot happens even though we don't think there's a lot happening on the surface. Obviously, things underneath are incredibly turbulent and moving. What was it about this that made you think, I want to produce this?
It was truly, and I say it with humility because maybe I wouldn't have made the same brave choice this late in my career with children and responsibility, but it was a creative impulse, really. I mean, I saw this beautiful film, which I fell in love with on the spot, and it was sort of as the credits were rolling, and I was sitting there, and I turned to my wife and kind of immediately grasped onto what I thought was inherently theatrical about the story, which was that it was a group of people stuck in a place, which just to me is always what makes plays, and why we go to the theater, because we want to hear stories about people that are stuck. If people aren't stuck, then it probably will make a better film, is usually my sort of simplistic idea of, I'm not a filmmaker though. Anyhow, so I had that impulse. I also loved the idea that it was about music and musicians, and these people were carrying instruments. I thought that was a ripe opportunity for staging. And I also admired just this idea that they were all speaking in a second language, that the Israelis were speaking in Hebrew, the Egyptians were speaking in Arabic, but that English was this sort of common broken language that they shared, and they sort of had to struggle to communicate. I thought all of those were just deeply theatrical ideas that all just excited me. And then it was kind of my pitching it to the filmmaker. When I finally convinced him that it was a good idea, it was only because I said, you're a filmmaker, but if you understood theater like you understood film, I think you would have made this a play. And when he heard me say that, he actually then all of a sudden opened up to me and said, well, it's funny because the original screenplay for this was like hundreds of pages, and what we actually shot was about 30 pages. So maybe you're right. Maybe there's a lot more there that I couldn't do on film because it just didn't work. So I think that was the option. It wasn't commercial. I'm a commercial producer, but it wasn't because I had dollar signs in my eyes thinking I was going to get rich. So, I think that was the impulse. It was truly a creative one.
David Yazbek, you were also a recording artist. I mean, you produced albums of your own music. On Broadway, you sort of had your comedy, a strong comic sense. This is such a soulful piece. There is the pieces of music live in another dimension for me emotionally than for most shows. I had to play today. There's some wonderful songs. If you know the show, Omar Sharif is a very famous now piece from it. Answer Me is a song now that's become a standard in many people's cabaret shows and elsewhere. But for me, there was a number that comes very early in the show called Waiting. and it's the musical in very short space of time. It's the musical encapsulation of what it means to be isolated in a place where there's not much sense of escape. And there are musical phrases, even just that are hummed by the entire cast, that so fill me up with that sense. And I know you're going to come up with something to brush off or make me feel like I'm a sap.
Yeah.
But I ask you, where did that come from, David? Was that something that, does this come from a deeper place for you than some of the other musicals you've done, very smart and funny musicals?
Yeah, I think the band's visit might be the sort of peak, moment in musical theater for me. And I mean, it certainly was, and it probably will be for the rest of my life, because I was able to approach it from a songwriting point of view much closer to the way I approach making my songs for my albums. So in other words, I was able to say stuff through the characters in this show that felt very personal. And that made it possible for me to, even though a lot of the music is in this Arabic tone, which is not how I usually write my own stuff for my band. But even though it's in that tone, the impulse comes from somewhere, a seed that's very deeply held for probably 3/4 of the songs. Whereas with Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, it was probably more like half the songs. And then with the other ones, it was comic assignments, and I'd be lucky to get in one or two sort of deeply felt, numbers or moments. But the band's visit is a comedy, so 3/4, and then the rest was sort of playing, like having fun. There's a aspect of doing comedy that's just really, really fun. I love doing it. But band's visit did a lot for me internally.
Yeah, I can't think of I'm trying to think of a show where I felt the merger of sensibilities happening so profoundly as happens when I watch this and I talk to the four of you. David Cromer, I feel like your work is so often so authentic. The characters for me feel like they're fully explored in the plays you do. But you were known not so much for musicals.
yeah.
And that becoming a character, and certainly in this show, music is a character. There's just no doubt about it. It talks to us as much as Dina and Tufik do. Those are the two characters, the Jew, the Israeli, and the Egyptian, who fall furtively in love over the course of this day. But David, how did you acclimate yourself to this world? Did you have to find some other skill set of your own to share the space between talking people and singing people?
No, I mean, I've directed. I love musicals. I've watched many musicals. I have very strong opinions about musicals, and I've watched a lot and I have directed several musicals in the past, not on Broadway. But there's all kinds of musicals, and if we were sitting here discussing that I had directed The Producers or Mean Girls, or you know what I mean, or Frozen or something like that, they're not. I would say, well, I had to really learn a lot. I mean, we were all fortunate, and going from the very first things Orin said in this conversation, we were all fortunate that communication on this team was such that all these things that everyone felt about what it was and our understanding of what it was, we stayed in communication about it, so that we all sort of knew what the brief was and what the job was. There's all kinds of musicals, and this is a musical that spent more time with interaction and conversation and small human moments which happens to, I ended up with the job, I think, because it happened to align with an aesthetic that applies to the other things I've directed. So I had to, but like every aspect of my job, you have to trust the experts around you to do what you don't know, and ask questions and get informed, and let your musical director direct the music, and have the composer explain to you why this was, and the writer to tell you why this scene was going to keep, I just always think about only really 2 or 3 scenes over the course of the time that we just kept rewriting, and so I just had to sort of be there while he figured out what it had to be. So I don't know if I've answered that question.
Yes, you have.
Okay.
Yeah, that was good.
Great. Yeah.
Generally speaking, so this was, this is the context of, 5 years ago, when you all, at least how long you guys have been involved with this piece. Are you surprised at the longevity that the show has had? Are you surprised at the response that people have had to the show? It's an intimate piece. It's not a, brass bands and marching, kids singing 76 trombones. It's a very different investment that an audience makes in this piece, and I think it's for people who love human stories that just happen to be told with music, that are sung as much as spoken. But are you surprised that it's had the reach that it has sustained? I mean, anybody can talk to this.
I've developed a theory about this, actually, because when we first opened off Broadway, we opened immediately after the 2016 election. And, we were proud of what we made, and we understood that we'd captured something. We could feel it in the room late in previews. And so we were pleased people got it. But we ascribed the hunger people seemed to have for it at the time to, this election's just taken place, and there's all this rhetoric about building a wall and shutting people out and not welcoming any immigrants. And so people, I guess, are seeing this show as an antidote to that, as a story about people crossing a border and being welcomed, and how it can enrich everyone when we welcome the stranger and so on. But now here we are all these years later, and as you mentioned earlier, our tour had to shut down for a year more because of the pandemic, and now the show's returned and it's getting a similar reaction. And so now I'm saying to myself, okay, well, everyone's been isolated, no one's been able to be with other people, and we've all been cut off, and it's all been virtual. So I guess now people are hungering for a story about people breaking through, loneliness and isolation and connecting. And so the theory I've developed is that it's a show about the antidote to trauma, right? That the antidote to trauma is human connection. And connecting is scary, especially if you've been wounded, but it's still the antidote. So my theory is that the show will speak to whatever moment it's in until such time as we reach a utopia of enlightenment where no one needs to be healed from trauma anymore. And people will be like, oh, what a curious period piece this is about back when there was trauma. Hopefully the world where
when we enter the Star Trek universe, I'll say quickly, and I can say this because I am not one of the authors, so that I always I knew fairly early on that this should be the reaction, and that it was very likely that this could be the reaction. And I know that sounds pompous, but as I said, because I knew that the material, the source material, the idea behind it, and the execution of it, which I participated in, but long before I arrived, the execution of it by the authors was special, and was had a universality of a decency and mercy, and wit, and its kindness was balanced with real world barnacles and walls and protections that people have to have. And so I always knew it would be we could strike a nerve with it. I felt very strongly that it could be this special, and that's what we tried to do. And then I also thought that about some other shows that sucked. So
David, you want to?
The hell do I know?
Like which shows, Dave?
Yeah, right.
Let's see.
No, I felt I while writing it, and incidentally, if you look at the crawl under there, my name does not have a C in it. It's Y-A-Z-E-K.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow, it was going so well. Talking about kindness and
it's spelled correctly
connection,
under
and
my
then-
Yeah.
name, though.
I think Itamar's name was misspelled too at one point. It was.
Oh, I didn't. I
Itamar.
missed it.
Yeah, yeah.
E-E-T-A-M. While we were writing it, especially once we were like a year into it, I started realizing in writing the songs that these songs were really all about connection, and I really dove into that, like the images that the imagric lyrics that I was writing, kind of quote unquote poetic images. A lot of those had to do with connection, and the metaphors, and I found that exciting and personal and very intimate.
Mhm.
And then we had a show, and then we are rehearsing the show, and I completely forgot that because I was done writing it, and I was more nervous about the more conventional stuff that your typical, and Orin is not your typical producer, that your typical producer might be worried about. Like,
Interesting.
what are they gonna, and David Cromer is there completely trying to enhance and honor the intimacy and the connection, and the inherent silence under it, like the ocean of silence under. And I just got more and more nervous about it until like really toward the end of previews, and I realized, oh, this has all come together the right way, So.
Well, I think you underestimate, the power of a show that can rhyme falafel and awful. So I mean, that alone should have told you your own.
surprising and inevitable, which is what theater should be.
That's exactly right. No, that's exactly right. No, yeah, Yazbek was absolutely the right guy for this job. Was there, I have that feeling too, Itamar, that I remember that. I remember feeling this very touching appeal to my good nature, that there is that, without it being a sentimental piece. It remains. It doesn't go those places that you'd think a producer would want it to go, which would be, we need them to do it in the middle, and and then it's David, you're shaking your head.
Oh no, I was just gonna say. You were.
I was sort of nodding and shaking because I'm thinking about Orin, and I'm thinking about this guy who puts up all these shows that have an aesthetic that I fucking hate.
That's right.
Because that's the company. That's the company. Some of them I like. Like a lot of the classics, and some of them push the buttons that I can't stand about musical theater. But Orin, when it comes time to produce what he wants to produce on Broadway, his aesthetic isn't that at all. His aesthetic is, let's dig down and let's connect in that way. And I feel
because he loved the material. Because he loved the material. He loved the source material. I mean, he loved what we were all doing too. But he loved the source material. We'll talk about it like he's not here. He loved poor bastard. We loved this. He loved the source material, and he loved it, and also didn't say yes, but let's make it something other than what it is. Look, we all at various times, and it's one of the things that's necessary about having partners, which is you're always nervous about, you've set out to do something, say delicate, quiet is not, this is filled with beautiful sound and elaborate sound and melodies and things, you know what I mean? It's not like we're sitting around there in dead silence and going shh to the audience and telling them not to enjoy themselves, but we were all sort of committed to this, but at various times somebody gets nervous, and it's the job of someone else on the team to say, no, but this is what we're doing. Okay, let's keep this in mind. That was the thing. I was always fascinated by, and these were all legitimate things. These were legitimate things because we didn't always know what it was. conversations where people would say, well, should there be more big numbers? It's a musical. Should there be more group numbers? Or like, it's a lot of solos and there's only one or two duets and there's only this one particular place where everyone makes this glorious, glorious, glorious sound, which is Answer Me. You know, and it took us a while to, and we'd be in a variety of meetings, and you know what I mean? People go, oh, is it? Should we? Mm-hmm. And that worry helps the creators focus on, you have two choices there. Right, should we panic and change it? No, wait, why don't we want to change it? We don't want to change it because that's what this is. So then you embrace what it is. It's about some sense of isolation. It's about some sense. Hey, anyone felt lonely in the last week? Hands up. You know? Okay, just me. Fine.
We're supposed to answer? I didn't know we were supposed to actually answer.
Anyone felt isolated or like difficult to communicate or like, oh God, you know, what now? I'm shouting, but right. But like, so that was the ongoing thing. So it wasn't as simple as like, we absolutely knew. There were plenty of times where we don't know. But even the thing you worry about can be repurposed as, wait, I don't want to change it to this. Why don't I want to change it to this? I don't want to change it to this because it's about the thing you want to change. And then when you do that, you then have opened this whole other, you've split this whole other atom that has all this other energy about what it is and what it can be. So,
right. Well said. Was there any, you know, we don't have that much time, but I do want to ask you, was there any trepidation at the beginning of why is everyone laughing? I missed that.
I'm laughing because they corrected the spelling of my name in the call.
Oh, of course they did. You have limitless power, David. That, you know, in this industry.
Wow. I'm sorry, Peter. I'm sorry, Peter.
But I wondered, was there any trepidation about being Americans and telling the story of these, you know, this incredibly fractious part of the world? And people having very strong identities in those places, and you representing those on an American stage in a musical. Was there a point at which you know, and I wonder, was there any blowback over the period of you experiencing this show where people found it, either they communed with it or they took issue with some aspect of what you were trying to say?
I'm genetically predisposed and inclined to make this show. You know, my father's side Lebanese, Arabic, and my mother Jewish, Eastern European, came down. So, you know, just in terms of what seems to be very important to everyone all of a sudden, which is what your fucking genetic gene, you know, makeup is, I was well situated.
As with Itamar, as with Eddie.
Yeah, my parents are Israeli immigrants, so I also felt like, okay, I have some authority over the material.
And they took care of that, so it didn't matter. No one asked me. They were fine.
I also think that it is about the region, and it is about, you know, these groups that we think of as being so at odds. But I think the story doesn't include overt, explicit political arguments. So I think it's difficult to see this show and say, you got it wrong. Like, you got what wrong? Because people aren't really talking about the things people are going to tell you that you got wrong.
Not making the argument, deciding to honor that, which, you know, because it's an adaptation from a movie, that in itself is a political decision to some people. And I think the one bad review we got, wasn't it from, not the Forward, but a specifically sort of right-leaning Jewish newspaper or magazine that said, "How dare you even make this show?"
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The film has had that kind of reaction too. You know, the film has been presented. You know, it was actually pretty famously not allowed to be presented in Egypt, although I think since then it has. But you know, on a commercial level, I think there were always some reactions. You know, people that tried to find out what they anticipated a musical about Israel and Egypt should be. But I think Itamar's right. It's just not the story we're telling. And so you can say any show is or isn't right for things that it isn't trying to do. They never talked about the boat in Top Gun. I don't understand why they left the boat out of the movie. But yeah. the thing about this for me, and I'm saying this now because I really want to say this to you, Peter, and to everyone who's watching this, because and first of all, it's so special to be able to come back to the Kennedy Center and to have taken this whole show and to actually tour the amount of time we've been able to tour it for. And it's extraordinary that the Kennedy Center has brought us back, because Washington was such a great place for us to begin this tour early on in its life. But it's so bizarrely unique as a musical theater animal, and it's such a unique experience to be able to come in and see something that like Cromer said, with such intentionality, was kept so close to the vision of what it always wanted to be. And I just think that's a gift. So the fact that this tour is winding up is very sad for me, for so many reasons, but mostly because I want people who are willing to kind of put themselves in that experience to be able to have that. And I don't know how many big commercial theatrical productions are able to kind of provide this kind of tone and this kind of atmosphere as successfully as this show does. And I think I'll mourn it not existing in the US, this version of it. And then there will be many other versions that will exist. So.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the Kennedy Center, because the production will be at the Kennedy Center July 7th to July 17th. And I think after that, it goes to Cincinnati, and then it ends in Richmond, Virginia.
Yeah. And then we wrap up the tour.
All right. So last question. So here we have this very successful team. You guys have put this, you collectively have had this wonderful experience. Why are you not replicating it? Why is there not the next, why are you not, the three of you plus Orin pushing, writing the checks? Why are you not creating the next show?
How do you know
all split up, go your ways, and don't come and reformulate? What's keeping you from being, from coalescing around this creative partner?
I'm glad you asked.
How do you know we're not, Peter? What makes you so sure that we're not?
Yeah.
Are you? That's the question. I guess I should ask. Are you guys doing something together?
Maybe a little something.
I'm not going to hear. You
Top
can't talk
Gun
about it.
musical.
What?
Top Gun 2, the musical.
Would you? I have
We're
not
going to
seen this.
focus on the space in between the two movies. That's where the real.
I have never.
How did he get the name Maverick in the first place?
That's what I'd like to know. Yeah.
I don't know what the big deal is about. I've never seen Top Gun, because that's how much of a theater nerd I am. I have not seen Top Gun, so
it was a commercial for war in 1992.
Yeah,
and it's a commercial for
I
war
know
now.
Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis or something, right? All right, well, gentlemen, thank you so much. As we said, the band's visit comes to the Kennedy Center on the 7th of July, stays till the 17th, and will soon be.
I just want to interrupt you to say one thing about you too, because we have to thank you for taking the time to do this. You've been a champion of this play since its beginning, and you're the champion of many, many great productions. And I just have to say, as someone who's a theater critic, but also as a theater writer, and I know how hard you've been working over this pandemic and from before and after. And I just think it's just so valuable, your voice and how passionate you are and how you really help prop these things up. It's just vital to any show like this surviving. So I really thank you for all of the love you've given this production.
You're a mensch for saying it, and I appreciate it. Believe me. And shows like Band's Visit are why this job is particularly endlessly rewarding. So thank you, gentlemen, again. So I just hope you'll let me break the news of the next show. I know we can't do it on YouTube, but maybe we can do it in the Washington Post. Anyway, thank you all for joining us today. Thanks to David Yazbek, Itamar Moses, David Cromer, and Orin Wolf. And we'll see you next time when we'll be speaking, who knows, about their next show.
All right.
Thank you guys so much.